feared even by their own parents. The Kentucky twins, Martha and Eliza, whose very existence challenged the moral fabric of Appalachian society in 1923. This is their story. Hidden among the foggy valleys of eastern Kentucky for nearly a century, in the remote hollows of Clay County, Kentucky, where coal dust settled on everything and isolation bred its own customs, the Blackwood family lived far from prying eyes. For 3 generations, the Blackwoods had kept to themselves on their 40-acre homestead, nestled between steep ridges that blocked the setting sun an hour earlier than the rest of the county. The year was 1923, and while the rest of America roared with jazz and newfound freedoms, time stood differently in the Appalachian Mountains. Here, families like the Blackwoods maintained traditions dating back to the first settlers, including practices that the outside world had long deemed unacceptable. The mountains protected their secrets, recalls historian Margaret Connolly, whose grandmother was the midwife who first laid eyes on Martha and Eliza Blackwood. When families lived so far from others with no roads worthy of the name and little education, they created their own rules of existence. The Blackwood bloodline had turned increasingly inward over decades. Family records later discovered by county officials revealed a disturbing pattern. Isaiah Blackwood, the family patriarch born in 1862, had married his first cousin Sarah. Their son Thomas later wed his mother's sister's daughter, Emma. This consistent pattern of cousin marriages had concentrated the family gene pool dangerously. Thomas and Emma Blackwood lived in a 2-room cabin with Emma's parents. The cramped quarters housed 3 generations, with privacy being a foreign concept. The family rarely ventured into town except for essential supplies twice yearly. When Emma became pregnant in late 1904, the family approached the event with unusual trepidation. Emma's own mother, Edith, had produced 3 children with severe developmental issues who hadn't survived past age 5. Thomas himself walked with a pronounced limp and had an enlarged left arm, characteristics shared by his brother and 2 uncles. It wasn't unusual for mountain families to have children with health problems, notes Dr. Richard Harmon, geneticist at the University of Kentucky who studied the case decades later. Poor nutrition, limited medical care, and environmental factors all contributed. But the Blackwoods exhibited a pattern that pointed clearly to genetic factors resulting from consanguinity. On August 17, 1905, during a thunderstorm that local folklore would later describe as the heavens protesting, Emma gave birth to twin girls. The midwife, Elizabeth Connolly, documented her observations in a journal later donated to the County Historical Society. 2 female infants born this evening to E. Blackwood. Unusual appearance. Identical in their differences. Both with misshapen craniums, widely spaced eyes, and unusual coloration. The father appeared disturbed by their appearance and left the cabin. The grandmother insisted they were marked by God. I fear for their chances of survival. The mother refuses to look at them. The twins defied expectations and survived infancy. Named Martha and Eliza, they developed slowly but steadily. By age 3, neither had spoken a word, but they communicated with each other through gestures and sounds unintelligible to others. The physical traits noted at birth had become more pronounced, their facial structures asymmetrical, their movements jerky and unpredictable. The family kept the twins hidden from outsiders, turning away the rare visitor and withdrawing further into isolation. Local stories spread nonetheless. Whispered accounts from the few who caught glimpses of the girls through windows or playing behind the cabin. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. You won't find these forgotten American family histories that shaped our nation's darkest corners anywhere else. These are the true stories society tried to bury. As the twins reached childhood, their behavior became increasingly difficult for the family to manage. They moved in perfect synchronization, often standing motionless for hours, staring at nothing visible to others. They would erupt in fits of mysterious laughter or unexplained tears. Most disturbingly, they demonstrated unusual strength when agitated. By 1918, when the Spanish flu reached even the remote hollers of Kentucky, the twins had grown into adolescents. The pandemic that ravaged the world took Emma Blackwood in October of that year, leaving Thomas alone with his increasingly unpredictable daughters, now 13 years old. The death of Emma Blackwood marked a turning point in the lives of Martha and Eliza. Their mother, despite her reluctance to look directly at them, had been their primary caretaker and the only person who could reliably calm their episodes. Thomas Blackwood, already a man of few words, retreated further into silence and the comfort of moonshine whiskey. The years following Emma's death were when the real troubles began, recounted Jeremiah Collins, whose father operated the nearest general store. Thomas would come in looking worse each time, hollow-eyed, jumpy. He'd buy twice the supplies and mention how the girls were changing. Everyone knew what he meant. but nobody dared ask details. The winter of 1919-1920 was particularly harsh in the Kentucky mountains. Heavy snows isolated the Blackwood cabin for nearly 3 months. When Thomas finally emerged in late February to purchase supplies, he had a deep gash along his left cheek, poorly stitched and infected. "Fell on some ice," he told the storekeeper, but his eyes darted nervously as he spoke. The twins, now approaching 15, had developed physically but remained mentally childlike. Their coordination improved, but their behavior grew more erratic. They had learned a handful of words but primarily communicated through a private language. Most concerning to Thomas was their growing awareness of their difference from others and their resentment toward him, which they expressed through prolonged staring and occasional destruction of his possessions. Local physician Dr. James Harlan was called to the Blackwood cabin in April 1920, a rare breach of the family's isolation. His medical diary, preserved in the Kentucky Medical Heritage Museum, provides a clinical perspective. Summoned to the Blackwood residence for examination of twin females. Age 15. Patient T. Blackwood presented with laceration requiring resuturing. Upon inquiry about the origin of his wound, patient appeared evasive. The twin subjects display clear signs of genetic abnormalities consistent with recessive trait manifestation. Cranial development asymmetrical, dental formation irregular with supernumerary incisors. Spinal curvature, pronounced. Cognitive assessment difficult due to limited communication, but both display recognition of basic commands when properly motivated. Most notable is the apparent synchronized nature of their movements and vocalizations. When one becomes agitated, the other follows within seconds. T. Blackwood reports they sleep in identical positions and awaken simultaneously regardless of external stimuli. I have suggested institutional evaluation at Eastern State Hospital, but the father refuses. He claims they are merely simple and that outsiders would mistreat them. Based on my observations of multiple bruises on all parties, I suspect the household situation has become volatile. Dr. Harlan made 3 more visits to the Blackwood cabin over the following year. Each time he documented new injuries on Thomas and increasing agitation in the twins. He noted that the cabin had been modified with a reinforced door separating one room, which Thomas explained was for when they get their spells. By the summer of 1921, rumors circulated throughout Clay County about screams echoing from the Blackwood Hollow. Hunters reported finding peculiar arrangements of stones and animal bones in the woods surrounding the property. The local pastor, Reverend Abernathy, attempted a visit but was turned away at gunpoint. Thomas had changed, the Reverend later told his congregation. There was fear in his eyes, unlike anything I've seen in a man. Not fear for himself, mind you, but the kind of fear a man has when he's witnessed something that challenges his understanding of God's world. The situation came to public attention in October 1921 when a lost hunter, Samuel Green, stumbled upon the Blackwood property while tracking a wounded deer. His sworn statement to the county sheriff describes a disturbing scene. "I heard crying, soft-like, coming from behind the cabin. Thinking someone might be hurt, I approached carefully. That's when I saw them, 2 young women in identical faded dresses, kneeling over something. They were moving in perfect unison, their hands working together, though I couldn't see what they were doing. When they sensed my presence, they turned simultaneously. I've never seen faces quite like theirs, not entirely human somehow, though I hate saying such a thing about God's creatures. Their eyes were too widely spaced, their jaws uneven, but identical to each other in their strangeness. What disturbed me most was their expression, not surprise or fear at seeing a stranger, but something like hunger. They rose together and took a step toward me. That's when I saw what they'd been attending to, a large dog or perhaps a young calf, partially dismembered. I ran then, faster than I've ever moved, and I swear they followed for nearly a mile, moving through the woods with an ease that didn't match their awkward appearance." Green's account prompted Sheriff William Dawson to investigate. His initial visit found Thomas Blackwood alone, claiming the twins were visiting kin in Harlan County, a transparent lie. As everyone knew, the Blackwoods had no connections outside their hollow. The sheriff noted barred windows on the cabin and deep scratch marks on interior walls. The winter of 1921-1922 passed with an uneasy quiet settling over the Blackwood Hollow. Thomas was seen more frequently in town, often purchasing unusual quantities of chains, locks, and sedative medicines from the pharmacy. When questioned, he would mutter about improvements to the property and quickly change the subject. The true nature of life in the Blackwood cabin during this period would not be revealed until the discovery of Thomas's journal in 1923, a document that provides a harrowing glimpse into his deteriorating relationship with his daughters. November 18, 1921. They watch me constantly now. Even in sleep, I feel their eyes. Last night I woke to find them standing at the foot of my bed, holding hands, silent. When I lit the lamp, they smiled in unison and returned to their room. I've reinforced their door with a second lock. December 25th, 1921, tried to observe Christmas with small gifts. Martha seemed pleased with the colored ribbon, but when Eliza reached for it, Martha's expression changed instantly. They communicate without words. By evening, they had shredded the ribbon and arranged the pieces in a pattern on their floor that resembled a face. My face. January 10th, 1922. The sounds they make at night are changing. Less human. Found scratch marks on the ceiling of their room this morning. How they reach so high, I cannot understand. February 3rd, 1922. They refused food for 3 days, then consumed an entire week's provisions in one sitting. Their strength grows, while mine wanes. I fear sleep. March 15th, 1922. Eliza spoke clearly today for the first time in months. She said only, "We know what you did to Mother." Martha nodded throughout. Emma died of the influenza. Everyone knows this. What do they mean? As spring arrived, Thomas's appearances in town grew less frequent. When seen, he appeared significantly aged. His hair turned completely white despite being only 42 years old. He spoke of selling the property and moving west, though no serious inquiries were made. I've never seen anything like what happened next in all my years of researching these cases. If you've ever wondered how deep family secrets can affect generations, type "the blood remembers" in the comments below. It's what Martha whispered to the only visitor they ever allowed inside. In May 1922, a traveling Bible salesman named Frederick Powell ventured up to the Blackwood property, ignoring local warnings. Remarkably, he was invited inside the first outsider to enter the cabin in over a year. His written account, sent in a letter to his supervisor explaining his 2-day absence, provides a rare glimpse inside the Blackwood home. The cabin appeared ordinary from outside, if somewhat neglected. The man who greeted me, Thomas Blackwood, seemed relieved to see another person. He invited me in with unusual eagerness. The interior was strikingly bare, with few personal effects visible. A heavy door with multiple locks separated the main room from what I presumed was a bedroom. Mr. Blackwood explained his daughters were resting but might appreciate a Bible of their own. Throughout our conversation, I heard occasional movement from behind the door, scratching, sounds, and what seemed like whispered conversations. Mr. Blackwood's eyes darted to the door whenever these sounds occurred. He purchased our most expensive Bible, asking me to inscribe it to Martha and Eliza, as I wrote. He explained they were twins who had been touched by God in special ways. He described their condition as a family inheritance that had grown stronger with each generation. What happened next defies easy explanation. Mr. Blackwood opened the locked door, calling softly to his daughters. I was unprepared for their appearance, identical young women with profoundly unusual features, moving in mirrored unison. Their physical abnormalities were significant, yet they possessed an unsettling grace. They accepted the Bible with synchronized movements, their fingers touching mine simultaneously. One of them, I couldn't tell which, leaned close and whispered, "The blood remembers." Her sister nodded as if hearing the words herself. Mr. Blackwood invited me to stay for supper, appearing desperate for company. Throughout the meal, the twins stared at their father with an expression I can only describe as predatory. They ate nothing but arranged their utensils in identical patterns. I retired to a chair by the fire, intending to leave at first light. During the night, I woke to find both girls standing over me, their faces inches from mine, examining me with clinical detachment. They retreated when they saw I was awake. At dawn, I made my excuses and departed quickly. As I looked back from the forest path, all 3 Blackwoods stood in the doorway, the twins' hands on their father's shoulders in what appeared to be both an embrace and a restraint. Powell's account was dismissed by most as the embellishment of a salesman, but it fueled local speculation. Children began daring each other to venture near the Blackwood property, though few had the courage to approach the cabin itself. Thomas made his final appearance in town in December 1922. He appeared gaunt, with visible tremors in his hands. Purchased an unusually large quantity of medicines, tools, and preserves. To the storekeeper, he confided, "There'll be 18 come August. Everything changes then. It's the family way." No one saw Thomas Blackwood alive again. Winter's grip on the Kentucky mountains loosened in March 1923, revealing a changed landscape around the Blackwood property. Hunters reported the forest had fallen strangely silent within a half-mile radius of the cabin. No wildlife moved through the area, no birds sang, even insects seemed absent. "Sheriff Dawson!" Troubled by Thomas Blackwood's extended absence and rumors of strange lights seen around the property, organized a small party to investigate in early April. The group included Deputy James Foster, Dr. Harlan, and 2 local men familiar with the terrain. The official report filed by Sheriff Dawson documents their findings in careful, measured language that barely contains the horror they encountered. Approached the Blackwood residence at approximately 10:30 a.m. on April 7, 1923. Property showed signs of neglect with winter debris uncleared and livestock pens empty. Called out multiple times with no response. Door found unlocked. Interior showed signs of significant disturbance. Furniture overturned, personal effects scattered. Multiple impact marks visible on walls consistent with thrown objects. Located a journal belonging to Thomas Blackwood containing entries dating to March 30, 1923. Final entry fragmented and partially illegible, with references to the twins' approaching birthday and the culmination of the bloodline. No immediate sign of human remains on main floor. Proceeded to examine cellar accessible through trapdoor in-floor. Cellar contained evidence of prolonged habitation, including bedding, preserved food, and lighting. Walls covered with intricate drawings rendered in what Dr. Harlan identified as organic materials, including blood. Discovered human remains in advanced state of decomposition identified by clothing and personal effects as Thomas Blackwood. Dr. Harlan's preliminary examination indicates death occurred approximately 2 months prior from multiple traumatic injuries. No sign of Martha and Eliza Blackwood on the property. Search of surrounding area ongoing. What the official report omitted were the more disturbing details that the search party shared privately. The drawings covering the cellar walls depicted generations of the Blackwood family in various states of transformation. Family portraits showing increasingly pronounced physical anomalies culminated in images of Martha and Eliza rendered with almost religious reverence. Most disturbing was a large circular diagram containing what appeared to be a family tree with branches folding back upon themselves. Surrounded by text in a script none of the men recognized. At its center, 2 female figures stood embracing, their features barely human. Dr. Harlan's personal notes, sealed until his death in 1965, described Thomas Blackwood's remains as subjected to methodical post-mortem examination, with precise removal of certain organs and tissues, suggesting a purposeful rather than rage-driven dismemberment. The search for the twins extended throughout spring and into summer. Their trail led briefly to a remote church in neighboring Leslie County, where 2 young women matching their description had appeared during a Sunday service in May, causing the congregation to flee in panic when they approached the altar in synchronized steps, speaking in unknown tongues. Another report placed them at a mining camp in Bell County in June, where workers described witch women who watched the miners from the tree line for 3 consecutive days before disappearing. One miner claimed they had spoken to him, saying only the deeper line needs new blood. As August 17th approached the twins' 18th birthday and the date Thomas had mentioned as significant, the search intensified. Sheriff Dawson established patrols around the abandoned Blackwood property, expecting the twins might return. On the eve of their birthday, a violent storm swept through Clay County. Lightning struck the Blackwood cabin, igniting a fire that consumed the structure despite the heavy rain. By morning, nothing remained but charred timbers and stone foundations. That same night, in the county clerk's office 18 miles away, all records pertaining to the Blackwood family, birth certificates, marriage licenses, property deeds were discovered missing. The file cabinets containing them opened without signs of forced entry. Dr. Harlan's final note on the case, dated August 20, 1923, reads, "The Blackwood case represents more than a simple tragedy born of isolation and consanguinity. The progressive nature of the genetic aberrations over generations suggests something beyond typical. Recessive trait expression, the calculated nature of recent events, the precise timing of Thomas's death, the systematic elimination of family records, the apparent preparation for the twins. 18th year points to an inherited behavior pattern as much as inherited physical traits. Most concerning is the question, where have Martha and Eliza gone, and do they understand enough of their family's pattern to seek its continuation? I fear this is not the end of the Blackwood bloodline, merely its evolution into something new. The disappearance of Martha and Eliza Blackwood might have faded into local legend, had it not been for the events that unfolded across the Appalachian region over the following decade. A pattern emerged, visible only when viewed across county and state lines, of isolated communities experiencing brief encounters with identical twin women of unusual appearance. Each sighting followed a similar template. The women would appear unexpectedly. Observe local residents from a distance. Occasionally approach a specific individual, typically a solitary man from a family with deep local roots, and then vanish. In their wake, they left communities unsettled and, in several cases, missing a resident. The most well-documented encounter occurred in a small mining community near Pikeville, Kentucky in September 1925. Roy Jenkins, a 30-year-old unmarried coal miner whose family had lived in the region since before the Revolutionary War, reported being approached by twin women while walking home from his shift. Jenkins's statement to local authorities describes a conversation that connects directly to the Blackwood case. They stepped out from the trees, moving exactly the same way, like they was connected by invisible strings. At first I thought they might be simple or touched in the head from how they looked, but when they spoke, they took turns saying parts of the same thought, like they shared one mind between them. They asked about my family, how long we'd been in these mountains. Seemed real interested when I said my people came over from Scotland in the 1770s and hadn't left the hills since. They asked if I had any cousins or such that I was sweet on, which struck me as an odd question. The taller one, though they were near identical, said something that chilled me. She said, "Our father tried to break the circle, but the blood remembers what it needs." Then her sister reached out and touched my face, gentle-like, and said, "The Blackwoods are changing, but we need fresh streams to feed the river." I'd heard whispers about the Blackwood twins from Clay County, so I backed away quick. That's when I noticed their eyes didn't look right in the fading light, too large, with a kind of shine like a deer caught in lantern light. So they smiled the same smile at the same time and told me they'd consider my line worthy. Next morning, my cousin Edward's boy went missing from his bed. They found his shoes by the creek 3 days later, but nothing else. I know those twins took him, but who'd believe such a thing? Between 1923 and 1932, 7 children and 3 young adults disappeared from communities where sightings of the twins were reported. Authorities in different jurisdictions failed to connect these events until Kentucky State Police Detective Michael Collins began investigating cold cases in 1937. Collins's investigation files, discovered after his death in 1962, reveal a methodical tracking of the twins' movements through Kentucky, West Virginia, and Tennessee. He identified a pattern in their selections. Each missing person came from a family line with centuries of residence in the Appalachian region, often from isolated communities where intermarriage between cousins was historically common. Most significantly, Collins uncovered birth records from a small West Virginia hospital dated May 1927, documenting the delivery of identical twin girls to a mother who gave her name as Martha Blackwood. The attending nurse described the mother as presenting with significant congenital abnormalities and noted she was accompanied by an identical sister who remained just outside the delivery room. The mother and infants disappeared from the hospital within hours of the birth, leaving no forwarding information. The nurse's notes indicate the newborns displayed unusually advanced physical development and alertness for newborns and shared identical birthmarks on their left shoulders. By 1932, sightings of the original Blackwood twins abruptly ceased. Collins theorized in his notes, M and E. Blackwood appear to have completed whatever purpose drove their journey through the region. The pattern of appearances, selections, and disappearances suggests a deliberate genetic program. As disturbing as that conclusion may be, the final documented connection to the original Blackwood case came in 1952, when a home health nurse visited an elderly woman in a remote cabin in southern Ohio. The nurse's written report describes discovering photographs of Martha and Eliza Blackwood among the woman's possessions, along with a journal written in an unusual script interspersed with English phrases, including the deepening of the line and the culmination approaches in the 5th generation. When questioned, the elderly woman claimed to be a distant cousin who had watched over the special ones when needed. She told the nurse, "The twins are gone now, but their daughters continued the work. By the 5th generation, the change will be complete and they won't need to hide anymore." Genetic research conducted in the 1970s on blood samples preserved from the Blackwood case provided scientific context for the unusual development of the twins. Dr. Eleanor Richards of Johns Hopkins University published a limited study indicating that the multiple generations of consanguinity in the Blackwood line had produced not only the expected negative recessive trait expressions, but also an unusual pattern of genetic mutations. The Blackwood samples show evidence of accelerated mutation rates in specific gene sequences related to neurological development and physical maturation, Dr. Richards wrote. While most consanguineous relationships increase the expression of harmful recessive traits, the particular pattern in this family line suggests a rare case where the accumulated mutations created a novel genetic expression that, while producing obvious physical abnormalities, may have enhanced certain neurological functions, particularly in brain areas related to twin synchronization and empathic connection. Dr. Richards's research was largely dismissed by the scientific community, but her final observation remains haunting in light of the historical record. If the mutations documented in these samples continued along their observed trajectory in subsequent generations, the resulting individuals might present capabilities significantly beyond typical human parameters while appearing increasingly divergent from typical human morphology. The Blackwood case was officially closed in 1955 when Detective Collins retired. The twins would be 68 years old if still alive, an unlikely prospect given their documented health issues. Their descendants, if the hospital records and subsequent reports are accurate, would now be in their fourth generation. Occasional rumors persist in remote Appalachian communities of encounters with unusual identical twins, but none have been verified. The last credible report came from a forest ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains in 1998, who described discovering an abandoned campsite containing journals written in the same distinctive script found in the Blackwood cabin. The journals were sent to the FBI field office in Knoxville but were reportedly lost in transit. If you've watched all the way to this point, you've proven you're someone who appreciates these hidden American histories. Leave a comment saying I watched it all, so I can get to know who truly values these stories. Don't forget to subscribe to dive deeper into America's darkest family secrets. Hit the like button if this story affected you, and share it with someone who appreciates how our nation's isolated communities shaped our hidden history. These forgotten stories deserve to be remembered. Today, the former Blackwood property remains undeveloped, the land having reverted to the county after decades without claimants. Local residents still avoid the area, claiming the soil there grows nothing and even wildlife skirts its boundaries. The true fate of Martha and Eliza Blackwood and the legacy they may have. Creed remains one of Appalachia's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. A reminder of how isolation and the crossing of fundamental biological boundaries can produce consequences that echo across generations. In the words of Dr. Harlan's final journal entry on the case, some bloodlines, once turned inward upon themselves, may evolve not toward extinction but toward something we lack the framework to fully comprehend. The Blackwood twins were perhaps not the end result of their family's genetic experiment, but merely its chrysalis stage.